At 7 a.m., my unemployed sister turned up at the apartment I rent from my parents. "I'll be living here," Mom said. "We're doubling your rent to cover our costs." When I told them I'd move out, they laughed. So, I took every piece of furniture. Has your kindness ever been mistaken for weakness? Have you ever felt trapped, watching your entire life crumble because the people who were supposed to love you most just couldn't see beyond themselves? Because that's exactly where I found myself, utterly heartbroken and on the verge of losing everything I'd worked for. I'm Allison, and at 28 I thought I had my life perfectly mapped out. I was a social media marketer, thriving at a growing agency in the heart of downtown. My office was this sleek, modern space with glass partitions and break rooms stocked with kombucha, basically, my dream job. My desk overlooked the city, giving me a sense of accomplishment every morning. My salary was good enough to save 20% each month towards a down payment on my own home, a future I was building brick by painstaking brick. A big promotion was even on the horizon if I nailed our biggest client's campaign. My apartment, the one I rented from my parents at a reasonable rate, felt like my sanctuary. It was a one-bedroom, close enough to work but far enough for peace. When my parents bought the building 5 years ago, it felt like a blessing, a rare family perk. I'd poured my heart and soul into making it mine. The plush sectional I'd paid off, the coffee table I refinished, my curated bookshelves with vinyl and psychology books. My kitchen might have been small, but it had my splurge Vita mix and my birthday gift espresso machine. My bedroom was pure heaven with a memory foam mattress and a reading nook. Every single item had a story, representing years of careful selection and financial planning. My goal was clear, my own home in 3 years. I even browsed listings, just getting familiar. But my family dynamic? That was always complicated. Especially with my sister, Stephanie, 3 years younger. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While I worked multiple jobs through college and graduated debt-free, Stephanie had her expensive private university tuition fully covered, changed majors 3 times, and never worked a day. This pattern continued. She needed a car, they bought it. I needed one, I got a loan. She lost a job, she moved back home, rent-free. I got laid off once, and they offered me a loan, with interest. Don't get me wrong, I loved my family, but I'd long ago accepted there were different rules. I made peace with it by building my independent life, one where I didn't need their support or approval. The apartment, at a below-market rate, had felt like a rare win, a taste of benefiting from family connections while still maintaining my autonomy. Then, the warning signs started. 2 weeks before everything went sideways, Stephanie texted me out of the blue. Unusual. Then Mom called, mentioning Stephanie and her boyfriend broke up, and she quit her job. I remember feeling an uneasy twinge when Mom said, "Your sister's going through such a difficult time. Family needs to stick together." I nodded sympathetically, not realizing those words were a chilling preview of what was to come. The night before, I was on Pinterest, saving ideas for a kitchen backsplash. I had no idea that within 24 hours, my carefully constructed plans, my hard-won peace, would be shattered. It started at exactly 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. The insistent pounding dragged me out of sleep a full 30 minutes early. Disoriented, hair everywhere, I stumbled to the door, expecting a package. When I swung it open, there stood Stephanie, 2 massive suitcases, a duffel bag, and her designer purse. Her normally perfect hair was a mess, her eyes puffy. "Hey sis!" she chirped, a forced cheerfulness that didn't reach her eyes. "Surprise! I'll be staying with you for a while." I stood frozen. What was happening? "Stephanie, what are you talking about? It's 7 a.m. She pushed past me, rolling her luggage into my living room. "Mark and I broke up. He cheated. Can you believe it? Then my boss at the boutique was completely unreasonable about me needing time off, so I had to quit. I just can't deal with toxic work environments on top of heartbreak." I slowly closed the door, my mind reeling. "I'm sorry about Mark and your job, that's really tough. But Steph, this is a 1-bedroom apartment. There's no space for you here. Why didn't you go to Mom and Dad's? She flopped dramatically onto my plush sectional. Their house is being renovated, remember? The guest room is completely torn apart. Besides, Dad snores so loud now, and Mom's on this health kick with only kale and quinoa. I'd go crazy. She looked around my apartment with appreciation. This place is perfect. You've always had great taste, Ally. I winced. Ally. That childhood nickname I'd outgrown years ago. Stephanie, I work from home 2 days a week. I need my space. This really won't work. Just then, my phone rang. My mother. A lead weight dropped in my stomach. Allison, your sister is there, right? Mom didn't wait. I want you to make her feel welcome. She's going through a very difficult time, and she needs family support right now. Mom, I understand, but my apartment is too small. Maybe we could help her find her own place? Or she could stay with Jessica? I suggested, referring to Stephanie's friend with a 2-bedroom. Jessica isn't family, my mother replied sharply. Family takes care of each other. Allison, your sister needs you. This is not the time to be selfish. I took a deep breath, moving into the kitchen so Stephanie wouldn't overhear. It's not about being selfish, Mom. There's literally no space here. I don't have an extra bedroom. She can sleep on the couch. It's temporary until she gets back on her feet. The tone made it clear this was an expectation, not a suggestion. How temporary are we talking about? I asked, watching Stephanie unpack her toiletries onto my coffee table. As long as she needs, Mom replied vaguely. Now stop being difficult. I raised you better than this. Do I need to get your father involved? The implicit threat hung heavy. I knew the drill. Dad would take an even harder line. Fine, I conceded, defeat heavy in my voice. She can stay for now, but we need a more permanent solution soon. That's my good girl, Mom said, instantly warm again. Call me if you need anything. Love you both. After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen, watching Stephanie rearrange my throw pillows and place her framed photos next to mine. A wave of invasion washed over me, but I swallowed it down. The couch pulls out into a bed, I said, forcing a neutral tone. We'll need to put it back during the day so I can work. I have meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays from home. Stephanie barely looked up. Actually, I was thinking I'd take the bedroom. The living room gets so much light in the morning, and you know I'm not a morning person. Plus, I have all these clothes that need to be hung up. I stared at her, disbelief rising. Stephanie, this is my apartment. I am not giving up my bedroom. She looked at me with that perfect blend of hurt and indignation she'd used on our parents for years. Wow, Ally. I just lost my boyfriend and my job. I'm at my lowest point, and you can't even make a small sacrifice to help me? You can have the couch. That's already a compromise. The standoff might have continued, but my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Be kind to your sister. Remember all the times she was there for you. I couldn't recall these supposed instances, but I knew this battle wasn't worth fighting. Not today. Fine, I bid out. You can use the living room, but we need to establish some ground rules. Stephanie's face instantly brightened. You're the best sister ever. This is going to be so fun, like when we were kids and shared a room. I didn't have the heart to remind her those days were far from idyllic, with her constantly borrowing my things and complaining if I set boundaries. As she cheerfully continued unpacking, I texted my friend Laura. Steph just moved in. No warning, no choice. Send wine and patience. Laura's response was immediate. Oh no. Nightmare flashbacks to college roommate days. Coming over tonight with emergency supplies. Hang in there. Looking at my sister singing to herself as she claimed more and more of my space, I wondered how long I could actually hang in there before something had to give. The first week was every bit as challenging as I'd feared. While I maintained my strict schedule, Stephanie slept until noon. Not an issue, except my once peaceful living room had become a bedroom, fashion boutique, and makeup studio all rolled into one. On Wednesday, during an important video call with clients, I had to carefully angle my laptop camera to avoid showing the blanket-strewn sofa, the makeup scattered on my coffee table, and clothes hanging everywhere. When my boss commented on my unusual background, I mumbled something about redecorating and vowed to address it with Stephanie that evening. But addressing anything with my sister was impossible. Look for a job? Sigh. Taking time to heal? Clean up? Promise I will. But somehow, she never did. Grocery bills gone up. I'm going through trauma, I need comfort food. By the end of that first week, my carefully stocked fridge was raided. My meal prep containers were empty. My expensive specialty coffee beans? Nearly gone. Even my hidden stash of dark chocolate had been found and depleted. Stephanie, I said one evening, finding her wrapped in my favorite throw blanket, watching reality TV at full volume. We need to talk about house rules. She looked up annoyed. Can it wait until commercial break? No, it cannot. I've been trying to talk to you all week. I sat down with a notepad of basic guidelines. First, quiet hours. Second, shared expenses for groceries and utilities. Third, personal space. Stephanie rolled her eyes. Are you seriously giving me a roommate contract? I'm your sister, not some random person off Craigslist. Exactly why we need clear boundaries, I explained, trying to keep my voice level. Because we're sisters, things can get complicated if we don't communicate. She laughed. Actually laughed, and turned back to her show. You've always been so uptight, ally. Just relax. This isn't forever. How long is not forever then? I pressed. Have you started looking for jobs or apartments? She sighed heavily. Can you stop pressuring me? I told you I'm processing my breakup. Besides, Mom and Dad said I could stay here as long as I need to. That was the moment something clicked. Wait, what exactly did Mom and Dad tell you? Stephanie shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Just that you had plenty of space, and could use the company, and that since they own the building, it's basically like staying with family anyway. My blood began to boil. Without another word, I stepped onto my small balcony and called my parents. My father answered. Dad, did you and Mom tell Stephanie she could move in with me indefinitely without even asking me first? There was a pause. Allison, your sister is going through a difficult time. The apartment is plenty big enough for both of you, temporarily. We thought you'd want to help family. But it's not temporary, is it? She has no plans to look for a job or her own place, and she's not contributing anything. My father's tone hardened. Your mother and I give you a significant discount on rent for that apartment. Many people would be grateful for such an arrangement. The implicit message was chilling. The apartment wasn't really mine. It was a family asset, to be reallocated as they saw fit. I am grateful, I said carefully. But I also need to be able to live my life. Stephanie is not respecting my space or my things. You've always been the responsible one, Allison, my father said, his voice softening into his manipulation tone. Stephanie needs that stability right now. Just give her some time to get back on her feet. Be the big sister. By the time I ended the call, my frustration had turned to bitter resignation. This was the same dynamic that had played out our entire lives. Stephanie's needs always came first. The situation only deteriorated. Stephanie invited friends over without warning, sometimes while I was on work calls. She borrowed my clothes, returning them stained. The water bill doubled with her 40-minute showers. Electricity spiked. My peaceful morning routine was shattered. My evenings impossible. My weekends derailed by her sudden emotional crises. The impact on my work became undeniable. I missed a deadline for the first time in my career. My boss, Diane, called me in, concerned. Is everything okay at home? I considered lying but opted for a simplified truth. Family issues. My sister's staying with me temporarily, and it's been an adjustment. Diane nodded. Family can be complicated. Just don't let it affect your work for too long. The Henderson account is too important. That evening, I found myself staying late at the office, dreading returning to my own apartment. It had become a pattern. I canceled plans with friends, embarrassed by the chaos, exhausted by the tension. One night, after finding Stephanie had used my expensive face serum and emptied the bottle, I broke down in tears. I called Laura my lifeline. "I can't do this anymore," I sobbed. "It's like I'm a guest in my own home. My parents won't listen. Stephanie won't change. I feel trapped." "Have you considered looking for another apartment?" Laura suggested gently. "On such short notice? My parents charge me 30% below market. I can't afford something comparable." "Maybe not comparable," Laura acknowledged, "but something that's yours, where you make the rules. Is your sanity worth the price difference?" As I looked around my once peaceful sanctuary, now completely overtaken, I realized Laura might be right. But before I could seriously consider that, things would take an even more dramatic turn. Exactly 1 month after Stephanie moved in, I received a call from my father while I was at work. His tone was unusually formal, almost businesslike. "Allison, your mother and I would like to have a family discussion this evening. It's important that both you and Stephanie are present. We'll come by around 7 p.m. A cold dread settled in my stomach. "What is this about, Dad?" "We'll discuss everything tonight," he replied cryptically before hanging up. I spent the rest of the workday distracted, running through scenarios. Were they taking Stephanie back? Had they found her an apartment? Or was it something else? By the time I arrived home, Stephanie had actually tidied up the apartment, a first since her arrival. She seemed unusually quiet, checking her phone. "Do you know what this meeting is about?" I asked, suspicion growing. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Not really. Dad just said they wanted to talk to us both." At precisely 7 p.m., my parents arrived. Mom brought a casserole. Dad carried a folder that immediately set off alarms in my head. We sat around my small dining table, the one I'd lovingly restored. My mother served the casserole while my father cleared his throat and opened the folder. "Allison, as you know, your sister has been staying with you for the past month. Given that the living arrangement appears to be working out, we need to make some adjustments to your rental agreement." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "What kind of adjustments?" My father slid a paper across the table. "We will need to increase your rent starting next month. The new amount will be double what you are currently paying." I nearly choked. "Double? Why would you double my rent?" "Well, there are 2 people living in the apartment now," my mother chimed in, as if this explained everything. "That means twice the utilities, twice the wear and tear on the property." "But Stephanie isn't paying anything," I pointed out, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "She doesn't have a job. Which is exactly why we need to adjust your rent," my father explained with the patient tone he used when he thought I was being obtuse. "We need to cover the additional expenses Stephanie incurs while she is getting back on her feet." I looked at Stephanie, who was studying her plate intently. A small, knowing smile played at the corners of her mouth. She had known. Of course, she had known. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You want me to pay double rent to cover Stephanie living here? Even though I didn't invite her, even though I didn't have space for her, and am already dealing with increased costs and disruption to my life?" "Now, Allison," my mother said, her voice taking on the warning tone I knew well from childhood. "Stephanie is family. Family supports each other during difficult times." "Then why is the support always one-directional?" I asked, the words spilling out. "Why am I always the one expected to give while Stephanie only takes?" My father frowned. "That's unfair, Allison. Your sister has had some bad luck recently." "Bad luck or bad choices?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. The table fell silent. Stephanie's eyes welled with tears on cue, a talent she had perfected over the years. "I cannot believe you would say something so cruel," my mother scolded. "After everything we've done for you, giving you this beautiful apartment at below market rent for years." I have paid rent faithfully every month, I countered. I've maintained the apartment, improved it. This was a business arrangement that benefited both parties. And now the arrangement is changing, my father said firmly. The new rent will be effective from the 1st of next month. That gives you 2 weeks to adjust your budget. I looked down at the paper. The new amount would eat up nearly 70% of my monthly income. It would destroy my savings, make my current lifestyle impossible. I cannot afford this, I said simply. Not on my current salary. Then perhaps you should look for a better paying job, my father suggested, with an infuriating shrug. Or take on some freelance work. You're always talking about those side hustles people do nowadays. The casualness with which he dismissed my financial reality, my years of hard work, made something snap inside me. Years of always being the responsible one, of watching Stephanie receive endless second chances while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition, culminated in this moment. Or, I said, my voice steady despite the anger and hurt swirling inside me, I could just move out. There was a stunned moment of silence before all three of them burst into laughter. Move out to where? My mother asked, chuckling. Do you have any idea what rental prices are like right now? You wouldn't find anything close to what you have here, even at the increased rate. My father added confidently. Your whole life is here. Stephanie chimed in. All your stuff, your routine. You wouldn't really leave. Their dismissive laughter felt like a physical slap. They truly believed I was trapped, that I had no choice but to accept their terms. Worse, they thought I lacked the courage to strike out on my own. I'll start looking for a new place tomorrow, I said quietly. My father waved his hand dismissively. Allison, don't be dramatic. Just sign the new agreement, and we can all enjoy this lovely dinner your mother made. I took the pen he offered and held it over the paper for a long moment. Then I set it down without signing. I'll let you know my decision by the end of the week. The rest of the dinner was an uncomfortable blur. I remained silent, a storm of emotions and thoughts churning inside me. After they left, Stephanie tried to act as if nothing had happened. They're right, you know, she said casually, from her usual spot on my sofa. You wouldn't really move out. This place is too perfect, and you hate change. In that moment, looking at her lounging on my furniture, using my Netflix, eating my food, speaking with such entitled certainty, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about the rent increase. This was about respect. About boundaries. About standing up for myself in a family dynamic that had been broken for far too long. I went to bed without responding, but I lay awake for hours, my mind racing with possibilities. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next day, I called in sick to work for the first time in over a year. As soon as Stephanie left for her daily coffee shop visit, where she claimed to be networking, but really just scrolled social media, I sat down at my dining table with my laptop and a notebook. First, I assessed my financial situation. My 20% savings, consistently for 3 years, wasn't enough for a house down payment yet, but it was a substantial emergency fund. Enough for first and last month's rent, security deposit, and moving expenses. I calculated my maximum affordable rent, 30% of my income. The number was sobering, significantly less than I currently paid, even before the proposed increase. I would need to compromise on location, size, or amenities. Next, I reached out to 3 real estate agents. I was honest, tight budget, 2-week deadline. 2 were doubtful, but promised to look. The third, Vanessa, was optimistic. Market's tight, but not impossible, especially if you're willing to consider neighborhoods a bit further from downtown or slightly smaller spaces. While waiting, I reread my current lease agreement. To my surprise and relief, there was no minimum lease term specified. After the initial year, which had long passed, I was on a month-to-month arrangement with a required 30 days' notice. More importantly, there was no clause about furniture or fixtures. Everything I had purchased was legally mine. My parents had only provided basic built-in appliances. Still, I wanted to be certain. I texted Laura, whose brother was a real estate attorney. "Can you ask Kyle a hypothetical legal question about tenant rights and furniture ownership?" Laura called back 20 minutes later. "Kyle says unless specifically stated in the lease, any furniture you purchase belongs to you. If your parents try to claim otherwise, they won't have a case." Armed with this knowledge, I felt a surge of confidence. By the end of the day, Vanessa sent me 5 listings. All smaller, none with the charm of my current place, but they were within budget and available immediately. The following day, another personal day, I toured all 5. The first 3 were non-starters. The 4th had potential but was at the absolute top of my budget. The 5th, though smallest at 500 square feet, had been recently renovated with new flooring and appliances. It was secure, had on-site laundry, and while 15 minutes further from my office, it was near a direct bus line. Most importantly, the landlord was willing to work with my tight timeline and offered a slight discount on the security deposit if I could move in within 10 days. I signed the lease on the spot, putting down a deposit with my credit card, and scheduled a final walkthrough for the following week. As I left the building, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. I had just committed to a complete upheaval of my life in 48 hours. Back at my soon-to-be former apartment, I started planning the move. I made a detailed inventory. Must take, could sell, could donate. Moving companies were prohibitively expensive for such short notice. That evening, as Stephanie chatted on the phone with a friend, completely oblivious, I reached out to my friends. Within hours, I had a volunteer moving crew of 6, with 2 pickup trucks and an SUV. Laura offered her garage for temporary storage, and her boyfriend, a contractor, volunteered to help disassemble and reassemble furniture. The final piece of my plan involved timing. I checked my parents' social media. Mom had posted about an upcoming family reunion at Aunt Jean's, a 3-hour drive away. They'd been talking about it for months, and I'd already declined. Stephanie, always eager for family attention, had confirmed her attendance. This gave me the perfect window. My parents and Stephanie would be gone from Friday evening until Sunday afternoon. I scheduled the move for Saturday, giving us a full day. As the plan came together, I felt a growing sense of resolve. This wasn't just about escaping an unfair financial situation. This was about finally standing up for myself and changing a family dynamic that had been unhealthy for far too long. The night before my parents' planned ultimatum meeting, where they expected me to sign the new rental agreement, I texted my father. "I have made my decision about the apartment. I will discuss it with you when you return from Aunt Jean's on Sunday." He responded immediately. "We need to resolve this before the weekend, Allison. Your mother and I expect you to be reasonable about this." I didn't reply. For once, I wouldn't be following their script. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of preparations. I arranged for my mail to be forwarded, scheduled utility transfers, and packed essential items discreetly while Stephanie was out. I withdrew cash for last-minute expenses and thanked my past self for maintaining meticulous records of purchases, complete with receipts stored in a cloud drive. By Friday evening, as I watched Stephanie pack an overnight bag for the reunion, I felt an odd sense of calm. She had no idea that when she returned, the apartment would be transformed, and with it, our relationship. "Are you sure you won't come?" she asked as she headed out the door. "Mom says Aunt Jean really wants to see you." "I have too much work to catch up on," I replied truthfully, though not for the reasons she assumed. "Have a good time." As her rideshare pulled away, I looked around the apartment that had been my home for 5 years. By this time tomorrow, it would look very different. And so would my life. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, as if the universe was approving of my decision. I'd barely slept, a combination of anxiety and adrenaline keeping me alert. By 6 a.m., I was sorting through the final items in my closet when my phone buzzed. A text from Laura. "Operation Independence Day is a go. Troops arriving at 0800 hours. I smiled at her attempt to lighten the mood. By 7:30, I had dismantled my bed frame when the first knock came. Laura arrived with coffee and bagels, closely followed by her boyfriend Marcus with his toolkit. Within the hour, the rest of my volunteer crew had assembled. "Okay, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "Thank you all so much. The plan is to have everything out by 4 p.m. Big furniture first, then boxes, then small loose items." We worked with surprising efficiency. Marcus and his friend took charge of disassembling furniture. Laura and 2 others formed a box brigade. I moved between groups, directing. By noon, my bedroom was completely empty. The kitchen half-packed. The living room furniture ready for transport. We broke for a quick lunch of delivered sandwiches, everyone sitting on the floor since all seating had been removed. "How are you feeling?" Laura asked quietly. I considered the question. Sad, angry, relieved, proud? All of it at once. She squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing. This is long overdue." The afternoon continued at the same pace. We made 3 trips to my new apartment, carefully arranging furniture and stacking boxes in the much smaller space. My new landlord seemed surprised by our efficiency. "Most move-ins I see are chaos," he commented. "You folks have a system." By 3:30, we were down to the final items. The apartment that had been so carefully furnished now stood eerily empty. The built-in appliances remained, along with the window blinds. Everything else, from the shower curtain to the light bulbs, was mine and packed away. I did a final walkthrough, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything. In the kitchen, I left an envelope containing my keys, the next month's rent check, as required by my 30-day notice, and a brief, factual letter explaining my decision. I was exercising my right to terminate the rental agreement and had taken only my possessions. As I stood in the empty living room for the last time, Laura put her arm around my shoulders. "Ready?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. With one final look, I closed and locked the door behind me. The reaction came sooner than I expected. We had just finished the final trip to my new apartment, and were celebrating with pizza and beer when my phone exploded. First, a series of texts from Stephanie. "What the hell, Allison? Where is all the furniture? Where am I supposed to sleep? Mom and Dad are furious." Then came the calls. My mother first, then my father, then my mother again. I let them all go to voicemail, needing time to compose myself before the confrontation. When I finally listened, my mother's voice was nearly hysterical. "Allison, what have you done? We came home to find the apartment completely empty. Is this some kind of joke? Call me immediately." My father's message was colder, more threatening. "This is completely unacceptable behavior, Allison. That furniture belongs in that apartment. You have violated your lease agreement. Call me back now before I have to take legal action." I waited until my friends had left, thanking them profusely, before I finally called my father back. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger when he answered. "Explain yourself," he demanded without preamble. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "I decided to move out, as I told you I might. I gave proper notice as required by the lease, paid the final month's rent, and took my belongings with me." "Your belongings?" he sputtered. "That furniture belongs in the apartment." "Actually, no," I replied calmly. "Every piece of furniture in that apartment was purchased by me with my own money. I have receipts for everything if you'd like to see them. The lease makes no mention of any furnishings provided by the landlord, which would be you and Mom." There was a moment of stunned silence before he recovered. "This is not about legalities, Allison. This is about your sister having nowhere to sleep tonight. The apartment is completely empty. There are air mattresses at Target for under $50, I suggested. Or she could stay at your house. The guest room renovations must be finished by now, right?" Another silence, longer this time. I realized with sudden clarity that there probably had never been any renovations. It had been an excuse. "Where are you?" he finally asked. "I have a new apartment," I said, not volunteering the address. "It's smaller, but it's mine." "This is not over," he warned. "Your mother is beside herself. Stephanie is crying. Is that what you wanted? To hurt your family? The guilt trip almost worked. Almost. But I held firm. What I wanted was to be treated with respect, I replied evenly. What I wanted was for my boundaries to be acknowledged. What I wanted was to not have my kindness taken for granted. So this is revenge? Some kind of childish tantrum because we asked you to help your sister? No, Dad. This is me making a choice about my own life. I paid rent for the final 30 days as required. Stephanie can stay there if she wants, but she'll need to get her own furniture. I heard my mother's voice in the background, demanding the phone. There was a rustling sound, and then her tear-filled voice came through. How could you do this to your sister? To us? After everything we have done for you? Mom, I said gently. I have done nothing wrong. I simply moved out of an apartment that was no longer working for me, taking my own possessions with me. But where is Stephanie supposed to sleep? There's nothing left. The same place she would have slept if I had never lived there in the first place. The apartment was unfurnished when I moved in. Remember? That simple fact seemed to stop her short. There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice different now. You really moved everything out in one day? Yes. And you have a new place already? You planned all this? Yes. Another pause. I never thought you would actually leave. There was something in her tone. Not quite respect, but perhaps the beginnings of it. A recognition that I was not the same pushover they had always assumed me to be. The conversation ended shortly after with vague threats about discussions to come. I hung up, feeling drained, but strangely peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I had drawn a line and held it, despite the emotional manipulation and guilt trips that had always worked in the past. Later that evening, I received a surprising text from my father. The apartment looks different. Empty. I had forgotten what it looked like before you moved in. We will talk more tomorrow. It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was an acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. In the weeks that followed my dramatic departure, I adjusted to life in my new apartment. The space was indeed much smaller, requiring creative organization and some difficult decisions about what to keep. My king-size bed dominated the bedroom, my beloved sectional had to be split to fit the living area, my dining table now served as a desk. Yet, despite the constraints, there was a lightness to my new home that had nothing to do with square footage. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, I felt truly in control of my space and my life. Every object was exactly where I wanted it. Every decision, from laundry to thermostat, was mine alone. The peace that came with this autonomy was worth far more than the extra space I had left behind. I introduced myself to my neighbors, something I'd never bothered to do before. The woman across the hall was a graphic designer who worked from home and invited me for coffee on our shared rooftop garden. The older gentleman next door offered to water my plants when I traveled. Gradually, I built a small, genuine community in my new building. Meanwhile, the situation with my family evolved in unexpected ways. Stephanie, faced with an empty apartment and no one to cater to her, was forced to make changes. According to my mother's reluctant updates, she'd taken a part-time job at a local boutique, similar to her previous position. It wasn't much, but it was a start towards financial independence. My parents, after the initial shock and anger subsided, seemed to be going through a period of reflection. My father, particularly, appeared to be reconsidering his role in enabling Stephanie's dependence. During a brief call 2 weeks after my move, he asked about my new place without the judgment I'd expected. "Are you managing okay with the budget?" he inquired, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes," I replied honestly. "It's tighter than before, but I'm making it work. The location is actually better for my commute, which saves on transportation costs." "That's good," he said awkwardly. "Your mother and I have been talking about Stephanie, about some patterns we might have encouraged over the years." It was the closest to an acknowledgement of their favoritism I had ever heard. And while it wasn't an apology, it felt like progress. My relationship with my mother remained strained. She still saw my actions as a betrayal of family loyalty rather than a necessary step toward healthy boundaries. Our conversations were short and superficial. Stephanie, surprisingly, was the first to reach out in a meaningful way. A month after my departure, she texted, asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, curious, but determined to maintain my boundaries. We met at a neutral cafe. She looked different somehow, less makeup, simpler clothes. "So," she said after we'd ordered, "your new place is good?" "It is," I confirmed. "Different but good." She nodded, fidgeting with her napkin. "I didn't think you would really leave. None of us did." "I know it was kind of badass, actually," she admitted with a small smile. "The look on Dad's face when we walked into that empty apartment. I wish I had taken a picture." Despite myself, I laughed. "It wasn't about revenge, you know." "I know that now." She looked down at her coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about all that stuff, about how I've always expected people to take care of me. How I never really had to face consequences because someone always bailed me out." I remained silent, letting her continue. "When you left, it was like, suddenly I had to figure things out. Mom and Dad brought over an air mattress, but it was uncomfortable, and I hated it. So I got a job to buy my own bed. And once I started working again, I realized I actually like having my own money, not having to ask for everything." "That's great, Steph," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "I'm still staying at the apartment," she added quickly. "But I'm paying rent now. Not much, but something. And I'm looking for a roommate situation for when the lease ends." We talked for nearly 2 hours, longer than we had spoken in years. For the first time, it felt like a conversation between equals, rather than the familiar dynamic of her taking and me giving. As we parted, she hugged me awkwardly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for being such a terrible sister." "You weren't terrible," I corrected her. "We just had unhealthy patterns, all of us." The healing process with my family continued slowly over the following months. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. My mother still occasionally tried to make me feel guilty. My father still sometimes slipped into his authoritative role. But something fundamental had changed. They could no longer assume my compliance or take my support for granted. Each interaction required mutual respect, or it simply didn't happen. I declined invitations that felt like obligations and accepted only those that felt genuine. I offered help when I could do so without resentment, and said no when I couldn't. 6 months after my move, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my parents' house. The atmosphere was different, tentative, but not unpleasant. Stephanie brought a dessert she'd baked herself. I brought a bottle of wine I could genuinely afford. My father carved the turkey with less ceremony than usual, and my mother asked about my new neighbors with what seemed like genuine interest. As we ate, I looked around the table at these people who had shaped me, in both positive and negative ways. I felt neither the resentment that had driven me away, nor the desperate need for approval that had kept me compliant for so long. Instead, I felt a calm acceptance, a recognition that we were all flawed individuals doing our best with the emotional tools we had. The greatest lesson I learned through this experience wasn't about furniture or apartments, or even money. It was about the difference between love and enabling, between generosity and being taken advantage of. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to set clear boundaries and hold them firm, even when it's painful. I also discovered the value of true independence, not just financial but emotional. The security of knowing I could stand on my own, make difficult decisions, and navigate their consequences gave me a confidence that permeated every aspect of my life. My work improved, my friendships deepened, and my sense of self strengthened. Today, 1 year after that dramatic moving day, I sit in my small but cherished apartment, surrounded by the same furniture that once filled a larger space, but now feels perfectly right for where I am. I've added new pieces chosen specifically for this home and let go of others that no longer served me. In many ways, that's what the entire experience taught me about life. We hold on to relationships, patterns, and expectations that once fit but may have become uncomfortable or constraining. Having the courage to assess what truly serves us, to keep what nurtures our growth, and release what restricts, is perhaps the most important skill we can develop. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where your kindness was mistaken for weakness, where your boundaries were repeatedly crossed, or where you felt trapped by others' expectations, know that you have the right and the power to change that dynamic. It may not be easy, and it may not happen overnight, but taking that first step toward honoring your own needs can transform not just your life, but the lives of those around you in ways you might never expect. What do you think? Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own well-being? Tell me what you did in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories.